Welcome back to the Outliers Project. I'm Molly Hawkins, founder of We Are Unicorns. And on this show, we dive into the minds of people who don't just think outside the box, they rebuild the whole system. Before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Hawk Media, for supporting this episode. And today's guest is someone I've been excited to bring on the show for a while, Johannes Ariens. Johannes is the general manager of Range Truck Group, which represents zero-emission truck manufacturers, including Mullen and Workhorse. He is also the founder of Routeline and co-founder of Loge Camps, a hospitality concept that turns forgotten roadside motels into outdoor base camps. And he continues to prove that sustainability can scale without sacrificing soul. Now, his track record spans the startup, outdoor, and climate tech sectors. And if there's a common thread, it's his ability to spot patterns, to act early, and create value where others see risk. Johannes, welcome to the show. I've clearly followed your journey for years now. I've been a part of it, and you've always seemed to be 10 steps ahead of everybody else. Let's start with where you're focused today. What's lighting you up, and what are you up to?
Hey, Molly, thanks for having me on the show. Super excited to see the Outliers show coming back to life, and just stoked. Been a big fan for a long time. Love the early episodes, and can't wait to see what you've got coming with it. As far as what am I up to now? Always a fun question in the life of a self-identified entrepreneur. Right now, I am working on a project, Range Truck Group in combination with Ziegler Truck Group. And what we are focused on is really trying to figure out how the zero emission transition in transportation happens and how to specifically catch that up in the commercial sector, and what has worked in the consumer side of the world to fuel the consumer transition that's going pretty well, especially when related to the commercial side. So what strings can we pull? Where can we change things to figure out how to what looked like in 2018, 2019, 2020 was going to be a tidal wave of transition over to zero emission and hydrogen transportation, really pretty much fell flat on its face. And so we're coming in, looking at that, trying to bring a different viewpoint and going, okay, what is working? Where are things working? How can we take those lessons that have been learned and deploy them against a space where they're currently not being deployed to see if we can get this thing moving?
Amazing. Now, before we dive further into Range Truck Group, you've had your hands in a lot of different spaces: military, contracting, hospitality, transportation. From the outside, for a lot of people, it seems like you've had a wild career path, but is there any common through line or pathway that, really you pull these ideas from? How do you go from a defense contract to reimagining roadside motels to helping usher in the zero emissions trucking era?
Yeah, great question. I kind of wonder about that sometimes myself. I think for me, I grew up out on the Olympic Peninsula, as you know, and some others might know. And in my family, in my life, concern for the planet and the environment was never not a thing. We were carrying around reusable coffee cups before reusable cups and containers were a thing. We had chickens. We lived in a pretty unique place. I wouldn't say my parents were hippies, but definitely naturalists. And we were the family that had all the 5 different bins at our house and drove all over around town trying to recycle absolutely everything we possibly could. And I would walk down the street with a garbage bag with my mom, and we'd go on walks and pick up garbage out of the ditch out on Highway 3, which in hindsight was kind of a terrible idea because it was really dangerous. But nonetheless, that is a theme, I think, for me, always really thinking about impact and how can we impact the environment. And then when you're trying to do something like that, looking at, for lack of a better way to put it, what works versus what doesn't, and where can your skill set or passion be deployed into something that maybe you're not seeing as much in that current space, or in a way that maybe just isn't working as well as it could. And so when I think of that, I'll give you an example going way back to the military contracting. I was a design build professional with and a lead AP for design and build, and delivered the first lead gold project for the Department of Veterans Affairs in Boise, Idaho. and was really proud of that as a lead goal for that government agency. And that was when I was around 23, 24, right out of
Oh,
college. I
wow.
actually started in that business when I was in college, working as a laborer. So spent a lot of time building the light rail on Martin Luther King Jr. Way,
Wow.
and going to classes at night, and then transitioned into to management when I finished school. And that really kind of started my path as far as, kind of from a physical building of things, and really where does the environment and activity in that space, how can that line up? And so this was in, like, I guess it'd be 2008 2010 timeframe, when LEED was really coming out
Hmm.
the gate, and the idea of green building in general was like the hottest ticket, right? And so really got in front of that and figured out how to deliver in a very complex environment, working for the Department of Defense and exceeding Department of Defense goals. Our requirement was silver, and so our from day one, our goal was to deliver a gold project and have that be for the first for that agency. And so we accomplished that through really just figuring out a very, very complicated system, which was called the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And that's really, I guess, where you could say I kind of sharpen my teeth on
Hmm.
looking at a space where something can be done and can be done better, especially in a very complex environment, which is working for the DoD. It's not easy. And then that translated over, I did that for probably 8 to 10 years, and then really started getting that entrepreneurial itch. And that's really what birthed Lodge, which was, hey, there's a big missed opportunity out there as a recreationalist. And this idea of going and tearing down buildings, this gets back into the LEED stuff a little bit. This idea of going and tearing down buildings in these markets where there could be enhanced opportunity for the economy, for employment, and for these physical structures and all the materials that go into these physical structures. Like, we don't have to start from zero to build an amazing
Hmm.
place in these places, right? And in fact, bringing them back to life in a lot of these types of markets that Lodge goes into, they had a heyday, and so the idea, kind of culturally speaking, of bringing something back that is already there, and infusing life using new tools, but not just kind of like saying, no, this is garbage, throw it away. Let's bring this back to life. And that was really what Lodge was about. And that wasn't just about buildings, that was about communities. And so and in doing that, just saving a ton of materials, and doing it the most environmentally friendly way we could along the way, which is definitely starts with not just tearing a building down, or building one from scratch when there's one right down the street that's decrepit, right? And so, for me, moving through the career, it's about what can we do with our skill sets to, really think about the environment and protect the environment. Before this podcast, I was doing a little reading and research on some of my own background, I guess, and for me, it was like, the theme is, how can we really serve the environment, deliver impact businesses, but do it in a way that's sustainable. And by sustainable, that means actually resilient and can survive, right? And so for us, that means the free market. Like, we've got to figure out how to deliver these through the market, for them to be
Hmm.
meaningful, long-standing changes.
Well, it's really refreshing to hear that obviously you're an entrepreneur, so you see opportunity, and it has to be viable from a financial standpoint, but it truly goes back to something that is really meaningful to you, the way you grew up. Have you thanked your mom, Johan?
Every day, every day.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it seems like you got the itch early, and so often entrepreneurs do get it at an early age. But and then let's I really love seeing all the businesses that you come up with and that you're involved in, and I love being involved in them too through We Are Unicorns. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think I see that through line after hearing what you have just shared about your intention and kind of your roadmap. Routeline, following Lodge. What an incredible concept. The member based adventure van platform and concept might have been a little ahead of its time. But, same thing, why put all these vehicles out on the road when you could share them? We know, I mean, I'm sure you have the data that supports like how often people really use them. I've had an RV in my driveway that I've used maybe like 2 or 3 times, and I mean, why not share, and actually, from a fiscally responsible standpoint, but then also just thinking about the output, you know, and the now range truck group, can you speak to, was this very intentional? Were these ideas all kind of birthing from each other in an evolution?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, and you could argue, is it the right thing to reference or not? Um, but I think probably one of the most headline worthy businesses that we've seen in the last 10 years or so, as far as really rethinking how we consume. There's countless examples of this. So this is just kind of one that everybody knows, but it's WeWork, right?
Mm.
And it's this idea of taking what we think an asset and how that asset is consumed, that thing is consumed, what we think about that, and then rethinking that and going, is this the only way to consume that? What if we cut it up this different way to optimize for more true user utilization versus just kind of how we've always done it, or this very binary consumption model, which in the case of real estate, uh, there's endless variations on this, but basically has been rent it or buy it. And what is WeWork? It's just a different way to rent it, right? Well, it's a lease. It's a cut up lease in a different way. You're sharing a square foot on top of one another. But when you look at true utilization rates, which Routeline was really all about utilization rates in the case of the RV industry, sub 14 days a year at average owning usage. So that's an owner that has an RV uses it less than 14 days a year. The amount of waste built into that, insane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So much waste, right? And there's a lot that goes into that, but that amount of waste it's I mean, frankly, like it's something I really struggle with societally, as far as how we think about our assets and in the business that we're in now. Uptime, it's this phrase that anybody from like the equipment world will recognize and have a lot of meaning associated to immediately, but this idea of uptime, and uptime is really what we need to be thinking about all the time, right? Like uptime equals efficiency. Efficiency is non-waste. Efficiency is the opposite of waste. It's anti-waste, right? And so, Routeline was a function of these things. Just they're fine, but they have a dramatic amount of downtime, and there's just so much waste in that. It's like, is this really the best way to do this? And then from a cost perspective, could we provide access to more people to do this and get folks outside, get people active, whatever, while increasing that? And we should be able to do that at a lower cost point if we can increase the efficiency and uptime. And so really the idea of like, I guess from sort of a basis perspective is, when we look at something, we make a lot of assumptions about how we access that thing or how that thing is consumed. And that might be a crappy old motel. Maybe it's an RV, or, in the case of where we're working now, which is commercial EVs, and EVs in general, there is a lack of adoption that I believe is heavily constrained by these kind of classic binary consumption models, right? And there's too many challenges to take on at once using these binary consumption models, and they just don't work that well. It's like, oh, I need to do infrastructure and I need to spend 3 times the amount of money to buy this thing. And so using these kind of traditional consumption models that the industry has always been using, it's really stunted growth in a way that, well, if you just go back to 2018, 2019, and what capital markets thought was going to happen in this space, clearly it's so far off the mark, it's not even funny, right? The amount of bankruptcies we've dealt with in the just last few months is astonishing. And so I think that's taking a new technology and not appreciating that, hey, if we don't make this a little more accessible via consumption models, then we're really going to struggle to get this in the market.
Man, it's really exciting to see kind of now that it's in the market. I mean, Range Truck Group is really excited to see where that journey takes you. And, I'm very excited to be a part of that journey. And, I want all of our listeners to take a chance, stop for a second and take a peek at your website, learn about what you're doing, find them on social media. That said, I have to say that, I would, be lying to myself if I didn't imagine that a lot of folks are really eager to hear a little bit more about Lodge. Now, Lodge Camps is such a beloved brand in the outdoor space now. You didn't just build something new. You reused something old and made it radically better. You've talked a lot about that. Where did the idea for Lodge start? How did you convince people to take that bet? It's it was a risk. And I think, it was unproven. Tell me a little bit about that.
What was risky about Westport, Molly? Come on. No, that's a great. I mean, Lodge is such a cool concept and cool brand, and I would say the where that space has evolved over the last 5 to 10 years with you see institutional capital, mega platform brands coming in, whatnot. Um, I look back and I think for me, what sort of like spurred Lodge was really probably I blame a lot of it, and speaking of like different uses of assets and real estate, Airbnb was another major disruptor, right? So different category. WeWork was really focused on office, as a real estate category. Airbnb, it was focused on hospitality, but really through the lens initially of single family homes, and thinking about uptime and utilization. Especially now, it's evolved a lot, like Verbo, so VRBO, kind of, which was before Airbnb. Really, same problem, right? Like you've got these vacation homes that people barely use. It just doesn't make any sense, and
Mm,
there's
uptime.
got to be a better way than the traditional timeshare model, which has to categorize timeshare as a single type of consumption doesn't really. There's so many variations of what a timeshare is, right? But this idea of like ownership and is that necessary or whatever, but basically what VRBO did and Airbnb did and is doing is looking at that time of that uptime utilization rate and going, can we make this more accessible, more people, and basically get the most out of this thing, whatever that thing is, right? And so in the case of Lodge, how I guess I personally got into it was through being comfortable around construction and understanding buildings, and that's kind of the challenge side of it on the asset side, on the money,
Hmm.
and then on the kind of philosophical, what does the market need today, what is it seeking, what is Airbnb doing right that's hitting and what's showing us that, versus where do we need to correct a little bit. And so for us, it started with an Airbnb unit in Seattle.
But I think if I were to imagine, for so many people, Lodge is special. The brand is incredible, but the community is what I think hits the community, and the space itself and the experience that you guys have created is really unique and it's special. I've heard so many people talk about how they've made friends just hanging out at any one of the Lodge locations. And I you talk about host like a friend, activating community. It's for what you've shared about kind of the model and your motivations, thus far. It feels like such a rare lens in business. Was there a moment that crystallized for you, or was it just something you innately, because you were an outdoor participant, it just kind of coalesced?
Yeah, I think what Airbnb provided an illustration to us, it provided an illustration to us as far as like some confidence around, can we go and do this thing? Because what Airbnb showed us was, oh hey, there's a whole bunch of places that the traditional hospitality space is frankly ignoring, as far as locations and geos and ways to
Hmm.
get to them, that space, basically like the economics didn't work or whatever, but some person kicked their house up on an Airbnb and it's just kicking butt, right? And then what that means from a traveler perspective, and the type of things people are looking for. Airbnb was built, it's a community-based brand, right? Like it's changed a lot over the years. Now it looks a lot more like VRBO. But
Hmm.
early Airbnb, you were having strangers come into your house and sharing your house with them, right? Like our Airbnb unit in Seattle was our basement with a shared entry and a shared kitchen. And that experience in those early adopters, and this is where when we think about like what bringing a new thing to market looks like, and then later how it scales, those are two very different things. But those early adopters, those first people that don't mind if their iPhone doesn't work, they just think it's
Mhm.
cool, right?
Yeah.
Those travelers, those people were, I would say, foundational in building our kind of like our confidence around making the Lodge bet, right? And who those people were people that wanted to go out and experience something in a different way than what the traditional kind of, I guess, industry was serving up to them. And so like
Right.
one couple, just going way back, was on one of those like sail around the world teams, and his girlfriend or something like that flew in to meet him in Seattle, and they stayed with us for like 3 days, and they invited us out to the boat, like the whole shebang. And and for them, what Airbnb meant as far as being able to go and stay with a
Mm.
local and really understand that community that they were a part of and that they were coming into, that's something that the Marriott certainly wasn't going to offer. And and when we think about the communities that Lodge goes into, it's really not about trying to undo that community. It's trying to light a fire in that community and really highlight what makes that place special. And so it's like, how do we take that idea of what people saw in early Airbnb that made it so interesting and so cool, and then can we go and kind of find that sweet spot between consistency, standards, all the stuff
Mm.
that early Airbnb didn't really do very well, but early adopters didn't mind that they didn't do very well. But something that scales a little better by still showing, hey, this has something unique, it's special. We want to highlight these things in the community, but we also understand that the inconsistencies of Airbnb can be, problematic.
Oh, I had some wild early Airbnb
Right. Yeah,
experiences, and I
everybody
will
did.
never forget them, but I still use it. Yeah, I love how Lodge, when I go to a traditional hotel when I travel, you go into the hotel lobby and then you go to your room and you come in and out of that room to go experience the city or do whatever you're doing in that town. But at Lodge, especially the Bend or the Westport locations, I go and I actually, there's chairs outside of the rooms oftentimes, or communal areas that are very intentional. And I prefer to sit in those areas. I prefer to sit out front of my room and actually interact with people as they're coming back from the bike trails. It's awesome. You're going to get like something more than just a bed. And it's pretty beautiful. You've said you're not in the business of creating markets. You show up where the need already exists. That's such a flipped approach. How do you know where to go next? What is your radar? What is your radar? I mean, is it just a lot of research? I know there's a lot of people that have ideas and a lot of people listen to podcasts. How I built this. They're looking for, kind of those patterns, the recognition. They're trying to figure out how do they take their idea to, where you've taken a lot of your concepts.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of times it's interesting to go, okay, how do you identify a pattern, right, or whatever that might look like. um and that's, I guess, it's easy to spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the market and what the broader world is seeing, and whatnot. But I think where my head goes for a lot of these kinds of things is just, where is there, to your earlier, you said being 10 steps ahead. It's like, I don't really want to be 10 steps ahead. Then you're trying to kind of making markets is
Hmm.
really hard, right? Like, making markets can be done, but the degree of the product side of making a market needs to be so far ahead of everything else that it kind of forces a market to be made, right?
Mhm.
You could argue right now AI might be like making markets, right? But these are like cultural shifting technologies versus evolution moving technologies, right? And so, are you changing 100% of something, or are you changing two? And usually the answer is two. And so you don't necessarily want to be 10 steps ahead. It's like you want to be like one or two steps ahead, right? And
That's
so
good
where
advice.
I think about that, and and where I kind of try and look trends, I'll use Lodge as an example in Westport, right? Like I started surfing out there. My parents were from California, grew up here, and we started surfing out there when we were like kids. Nobody surfed out there. Zero. like, like, like no one. And this would have been like, I guess when I was in high school. So like early 2000s. Um, and, and at some point you just have to start looking at, I define as like looking for trends is, to me, it's about looking for inevitabilities. And then what you're not trying to create the trend. You're not trying to make the market. You're trying to align your timing with the inevitability. Right. And so Westport, as an example in surfing, we're going out there and just over time, you've got a few factors at play. One, coast is a limited commodity. There's no more coast being developed. It doesn't, we're not, there's no coast factory where we're churning out more waves down at the coast. It's not true. We're churning out waves.
I was going to say.
But as far as like, the coast is a finite commodity. And if you think about climate change and what's going on, the value of that coast is only going to go up over time, period. To me, that's a just right in it. There's zero for me, and you could argue anything, but there's no risk in that statement. Like that land is some of the most valuable, important property physically that exists, period. Like it just economies, energy, food, you name it, right? Like I'm a huge, I was very involved with Surf Rider Foundation. Like water is life, period. It's just, that's it. And so when you think about that, and then you go out there and you spend enough time doing something over years, you go, okay, this is a thing that's happening. There's areas that are going well, not going so well. That parking lot just kept filling up. And then you look at what's going on in Seattle a couple hours away. Economy's just doing this, right? And outdoor active rec is just kind of doing this upward rise. And you're going, okay, the math's off. This is going to happen, right? And so this goes back to your inevitability thesis. So I like to, this is a phrase we use all the time. What's the inevitability thesis? Can you build a thesis that like you tell it to anyone and they're like, yeah, I believe that. That's your inevitability thesis. And then it's just all about time. Like then all you got to do after that, which this is not all you have to do because it's extremely difficult, but how do you get one step in front of whatever the macro is? Because if it's inevitable, the macro market is going to do this thing, period. And so then just get one step to two steps in front of it. And that's your timing. That's your how. What does that look like? All the hard stuff kind of, but start with an inevitability thesis and build on top of that. And then just be barely in front of it. And that's like, when you think of this kind of stuff. So like Lodge, to me, like the idea that like Westport as an example, as one example, wasn't going to do what Westport is currently doing. It just didn't exist. It was just for sure. Then it's just a matter of figuring out your timing to manage your risk and your capital and velocity and deployment and all that kind of stuff. Routeline, same thing. I think that there were some major things. I mean, I could talk a lot about where Routeline was off in timing and how we would do it again, and if we do it again, what it would look like, how that would change. But fundamentally, the idea that we have this massive asset class that's sitting out there at a 14% utilization rate, or excuse me, far less than 14%, 14 days a year, that's not going to last. That like our market will not allow that kind of inefficiency to last. So that will change. And so we'll figure out when and how and what that'll look like. And then EVs, pretty simple. The idea that we're going to be using like dino bones to move stuff around in 50 years, I think you are crazy if you think that.
Okay, well,
so then, like,
what about you have this inevitability thesis, and so say somebody has a great inevitability thesis, but let's just be real. What if they're a shit presenter, not very confident, and they don't have an audience to bring this thesis to? What do they do with it? I feel like a lot of people are sitting on great ideas. Where do they go?
Find a buyer, right? So this gets down to I would say like basics of go-to-market stuff, which is where I think that in the case of the EV thing has just been so messed up, is any good thesis requires a test,
Mm.
right? And so yeah, this idea of like work under an inevitability thesis, you don't have to do that. There are things that you can do that can go and become real, and
Mm.
that I would say that's what I try to do
Mhm.
is work under a thesis that I fundamentally, and right or wrong, maybe it's not actually an inevitability thesis, but I believe that it is, because that's really what matters, is that I'm behind. Like, if I believe that what I'm working on is inevitable, then I can get behind it, right?
Mhm.
And then, because then you just get into execution.
Mm.
um there's definitely things that aren't inevitable that work every day, and so that can be for other people. um how do you start if you're not all the things that you know whatever, charismatic, blah blah blah. It's like don't worry about you, worry about testing your thesis,
Mm.
right? Like forget, like, what you need to do is test your thesis and then let the market do the work, right? Like, can I get one person to do this thing? And so right now, it's funny when we talk about like adoption, all this stuff. It's like the core miss that I see in EV transition is what we forgot: 95% of the market are small business owners and not these giant fleets, and that any new idea starts with one person.
Mm.
And what is a small business? It's a small business is an owner operator. That's one person that you can impact. So go find the one person, right? And start proving that thesis. And then you find
Right.
two, and then three, and then suddenly the inevitable thesis. Now you start to build a time frame around that, and a way that it's the other things you need to do to make your inevitable thesis become true start to become clear, because the market's telling you how to do it. You're not trying to like guess. You're building the pathway to your inevitable thesis through using the market and leveraging the market to go out and figure what's going to work and what isn't.
Wow, that's incredible advice, Johan. Have you been invited ever to speak at business schools or thought about writing a book yourself?
No,
I
they
mean,
don't like me.
oh man, well, because you're disrupting probably all the things that they're saying and teaching. I think you have a lot of powerful advice that does counter kind of what I think a lot of other people are doing. It's you're exactly what probably Henry Ford or the Airbnb guys were before you.
Thank you.
Well, again, you guys, you're listening to Outliers Project. I'm here with my dear friend and special guest, Johannes Ariens, co-founder of Loge Camps, founder of Routeline, and now CEO of Range Truck Group. Is that right?
That's right.
See. All right. Well, okay. So let's talk a little bit about scaling. One thing I've always wondered: how do you maintain the soul of a project as you scale it? Lodge now has multiple locations. Zero emissions trucking is moving really, really fast. What's the tension like between staying scrappy and growing up as a business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think if I were to kind of drawing the lines of connectivity, um, at the general level, when you think of scaling, is a lot like when you think of going to market, which is look 10 steps ahead, right? To your point earlier, like, how many steps ahead are you? It's like and this is something that's very hard for a lot of people, self included, very, very hard for me to do. And I have to remind myself, why I end up sounding like a record player a lot of the time is because I'm actually speaking to myself and reminding myself of these tenets, right? Look and think 10 steps ahead. Act one, right? Like, is this a thing that's going to happen? Yes. Okay, cool. Here's what that's going to look like when this all happens. Where do I want to be? What do I want to
Mm,
look like? 10 steps ahead. When my thesis becomes true, where do I live in that? That's your North Star, right? But in the meantime, you just need to put like gas in the rocket, because that, like, you're not, like, you need to go and sell one thing. You need to get one piece of real market feedback, right? And you need to go put, like, in Range, as an example, we have one job, and that is putting miles on the road using zero emissions, period. More miles, that means more market share, means more adoption, and then you have clay, and that you can start modeling, right? Like, you can't start building your model without some clay, and your model is the market, right? Or excuse me, your clay. your clay is the thing that you build your model out of, but you need clay to work with. And so in the case of range, it's just miles, right? Like we will build revenue and we will figure out how to build, but we need to constantly be growing our market share and getting more clay to build a model, and then we'll figure out from there. Lodge, same thing. Like you need one. You get one to work, then you work on two, right? And you'll know when you're going off brand, and when things are, like the market will tell you when you're losing your way. But if you're only focused on the end, then you're not going to build progressively. And so like look 10 steps out, act one, right? And then really think about building your team. I mean, all this comes down to team, right? As far as like, how do you maintain, that special vibe, right? Like I love that word because it's totally unclear, but like
The special sauce, right?
in a brand like Lodge, it's critical, and it's not been easy. When I was still day to day there, it was hard, and it only gets harder as you scale and as your geos expand, and you have different outcomes that people are looking for, and really, how do you correct for that? It's like go back to your North Star, your 10 steps out, and go, what do we want to look like 10 steps out? Is what we're doing today serving that or not? Right. And then, and if the answer is not very, very like definitive yes, then it's like, okay, what do we do? Change.
Oh man. Well, so what is what are the tariffs? What's the current global, economy going to do to all of these projects, and looking at disruption, eco sustainability, thinking about a sustainable future? I know that's a lot wrapped into one kind of fragmented sentence in question, but what the hell is happening? What should we be thinking about?
I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people to have excuses to be less decisive and continue their track towards their thesis.
Mm.
I think that's what it is. I think it's a massive distraction, and it's not that I don't think it's real or to underplay the reality of the difficulties that it is bringing today, for everyone, right? Like, Lodge, high interest rates are a big problem. Like buy lots of buildings, but like buying fleet inventory, high interest rates are a big problem. In our case, batteries are made in China, period.
Shit.
Right. So are those things real? I would argue under current administration, sometimes, are these challenges real? Like whatever. Is your thesis strong enough to weather, like, this is a thing, right? There will always be what was the last thing? I think it was called COVID, right? Right. So how good is your thesis? How's Lodge doing today? Is it still there? Because I'm pretty sure like in March of 2020, everything was going to go out of business and COVID was going to kill the world, and hospitality was dead as we knew it. I think Lodge is going to be around 20 locations by the end of this year. Right.
That's incredible.
And so like that was a thing. Tariffs are a thing today. How is your thesis good enough? Is it inevitable enough in the world that I like to live in to weather the thing today? Because otherwise, like, just keep working, do your job, focus on your customer today, and make sure that your thesis tomorrow is strong enough to not get like messed up by this shit. Because that's all it is. It's just a bunch of noise. It's gonna pass. Like, are we going to be using dino bones for fuel, for transportation, the world's largest single carbon generating thing that we do, in 50 years? My answer is still no, regardless of whatever's going on in Washington, D.C. and whatever the tariff rate is. My answer is no. And so, like, it's, yep, like, welcome to life and doing business. And I'm pretty sure our job as people trying to do this stuff is exactly trying to figure this out. And for me, it's just an opportunity, because in the meantime, everyone's peeling back, freaking out, hedging, all this stuff, because I don't believe that they believe their thesis well enough to go, this is actually an opportunity. The amount of amazing people that are coming on the market right now for us to hire, who are incredibly dedicated to this because they're getting laid off by companies who don't, basically just aren't committed enough to their thesis in the long term. and they're making short-term decisions that is giving us an opportunity to steal market share.
So you're
That's what's
saying
going.
you're ready to hire a whole bunch of people right now?
Yeah, all in. It's going.
All
It's
in.
game time. Like,
I,
I mean, like you have to. It's I could theorize. It's like if somebody can tell me what Trump's going to do tomorrow, like, or if like that person, their value is going to be very high to everyone. Nobody can. So why bother?
yeah.
Like, it's just it's just air and noise that just fuels the fire. Good. Good.
Oh man, I don't know if that was me
I
or
offended
if that
Molly.
was you. I missed that last part.
Oh, I just
Can you
said,
hear me again?
I guess the way to when I think about disruption and these kinds of externals, right, is like it's an opportunity to test your thesis, and it's noise that is, in my opinion, an opportunity to just be distracted, take you off your track,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not to say that they aren't real and things you got to change your like change your one step, but don't change your north star, right? And so yeah, it's a huge thing, but it's a huge opportunity right now in a case as like a startup trying to compete with like huge organizations. Um, I'm pretty sure it's an opportunity for us to take extra market share at a really really good price.
And what I hear, you're really what to me really stands out is encouraging people to really believe in their thesis, understand it, and continue to validate it. And those steps to take. Obviously, you don't want to ignore that 10th step, but don't get too ahead of your ski tips.
Yeah, yeah, skiing like that's it. I mean, it's it's like for us as it relates to the today and the projects I'm working on today. It's like, yeah, do you need to adjust your velocity a little bit? What's going on with incentives? Incentives are a huge part of this market, right? How can we change our model a little bit? How can we adapt our model to go and Molly, this is something that we're working on right now, right? How can we think about our model today to go
Mm-hmm.
to where the macro market is changing to get a little bit more in front of the next step that the market is driving, right? Because right now, like in the commercial world, um, it's tough. There's things to be done, but we're definitely pushing the ball up a steeper hill than in other areas of EV adoption. And can we move a little bit into those to then create leverage that we can move over into those areas where adoption is going to be a little more late, right? And so that idea of like, what can I do now, appreciating that my thesis is like, yeah, all this stuff's going to happen. So in the meantime, I want to build a business that's going to support those that long term. Like that long term doesn't move one bit, but how we get to it, it's like that's our day-to-day job, right?
So, looking across all your projects from Routeline to Lodge and your current work with zero emissions transportation, I know they say never pick a favorite, but what are you most proud of?
It's interesting because people always used to ask me that about lodge properties too, um,
Ooh.
constantly, right? So like, um, it's hard to, like lodge is definitely a amazing thing. I'm extremely proud of it. As There you go, yeah, lodge sticker. Yeah, I say they're all. In fact, I'm going over to Leavenworth next week. Really close with the crew, and really amazing business. And what's been so cool about that is um, to see how we were part of really kicking off sort of like I would say the next evolution of hospitality that Airbnb really like kind of Airbnb was like one version of it. And then this next evolution of it was really kind of like where Lodge lived. And we were kind of like I said earlier, like barely in front of this like rather macro trend of sort of like alternative hospitality and what that looks like. Um, so I'm extremely proud of Lodge, and it would be hard for me not to answer that question with just saying Lodge. But then I would say the evolution of anyone's career and kind of where my passions really lie is like Lodge is a really cool brand that's creating a lot of value and making a lot of memories for people and
Mm.
doing a lot of good. Um, my convictions around the environment are deep. And so the closer I can get to working on the biggest problems for my deepest and like my deepest convictions, um, the more I am proud of what I'm doing. And so maybe you would argue probably a little less sexy. Um, than
Your
the Lodge
proudest
brand.
moment has yet to come, is what you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah.
yeah, like, and especially today, right? But like what we're doing and what we're working on with Range is we're in the infantile stage of what that business looks like, and I think it'll probably be, for those that follow along, really exciting to see how we're thinking about what actually driving broad, true zero emission adoption looks like
Mm.
in all the industries that we're touching, how we're thinking about that relative to how the broader industry has been thinking about that and acting. That's what I'm super excited about. And that will probably start to look a little bit more on the, I would say, on like the consumer brand side, a little more like some of the projects we've done in the past. But
That's what people want to hear.
ultimately, what's that?
That's what
Yeah.
everybody wants to hear.
Yeah, so it's, the departure from kind of the consumer brand thing and the sexy brand, all that kind of stuff, um, is well, I think it's part of where the industry has gotten it wrong. We'll put it that way as it relates to adoption. I think that why we're not seeing better adoption is that there is not enough focus on brand and the psychology of brand and how you really get people engaged in these movements through the utilization of storytelling and brand. Um, there's zero coincidence that that I'm here working on this project and that Molly is here working on this project as it relates to the partners that I have on this project and why we are the ones doing this. There's zero coincidence around that. That has everything to do with our beliefs around how this actually gets done, appreciating that if you just go and look at the data from the last 5 years about how it's going so far, clearly it's not being done right today. And so it needs to be done a lot different. And the personalities on this call would be representative of a little bit of how we think that looks going forward versus how it's being done, kind of the status quo. Right. And so, super long way to answer. I'm extremely proud of Lodge. Um, Routeline is probably something that I would argue isn't dead, but it's on the shelf. Um,
Foreshadowing.
the venture into really, really unique ways of thinking about that particular industry as it relates to consumption. And really, for me, that was kind of the kickoff of like getting into more innovative finance and consumption models. Whereas Lodge was like a really cool brand, but we didn't really like dramatically change the consumption model of a hotel, right? Like we still do rate management, we list nightly stuff, and that might not be forever. Like maybe there's a membership in Lodge's future, something like that. Who knows? But fundamentally, it was a brand, like I would say, like a very significant brand play, right?
Interesting.
Versus product and model play, where that's really where Routeline started to I would say I started to develop my thinking around like consumption models and modeling. And so I think we, had some headwinds with Routeline and we dealt with that in a way that still gives us the opportunity to revisit that in the future. Um, i.e. we didn't bankrupt it. Officially, we drew it down. And then with Range, similar, it's about figuring out a way to actually go and commercialize this in a unique way in a place that's really challenging to do that and make a huge environmental impact, which is like for me a kind of a foundational core belief. So if I were building or if I were rating the the pride in my accomplishments as it relates to carbon, I would say range is on a really good track.
Oh, I love that. I loved hearing that and those through lines and your recognition of brand. But I am a little disappointed. I think the answer I was looking for is your children. Most proudest accomplishment.
Yeah, they're cool.
Oh, Johannes, thank you so much for being here. You're proof that ideas with heart and soul and thoughtfulness can lead to the future without leaving, people or the planet behind. I think people forget that. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Outliers Project, where we talk to people brave enough to do things a little bit differently, I like to say. But be sure to follow Johannes's work. Check out Loge Camps, Routeline if you've got a business with delivery vehicles or have massive transportation infrastructure or micro. Keep an eye out for what Range Truck Group is doing. I'm Molly Hawkins. See you next time. Keep creating the future you want to live in. Thank you, guys.